Nancey, you and I have been fascinated by cosmology for all of our intellectual lives. I started
Yes.
in neuroscience, you started in philosophy, but we've both focused as kind of amateurs in cosmology. Now, this is the fifth time we have done Closer to Truth together, and the first time was in 1999, and I so remember distinctly you and Andre Lindy sitting together
Yes.
talking about the multiverse, and you said something like, I was really excited, me and my colleagues, about fine tuning because we thought we had an answer, a physical answer to demonstrating the need for a creator until Andre came along
Yes.
with his multiple universes. And Andre's reaction was, "Oh, Nancey, I didn't want to destroy your faith. No, I didn't want to do that." So, but you know, we were joking, but this is a serious
Yes.
point. How do you see the history of cosmology as it affects your status as a believer and as a believer who is a philosopher of religion?
Well, I would like to take the history back a lot longer. Up through the Middle Ages in particular, the discussions with the theologian Thomas Aquinas, comparable discussions in Judaism and Islam, reacting to Aristotle's cosmology. And one of Aristotle's positions was that the universe is eternal. There was relative consensus amongst theologians through the Middle Ages, and I'm not sure exactly when it started to break apart. But the assumption was that the doctrine of creation is actually talking about the world that we live in. And some of the points that were made is the world was created out of nothing. Scripturally, it had a beginning, temporal beginning, that the world is good, and so forth. And when modern theology came along and put the focus all on human religiosity and human awareness of God, those questions about the actual universe dropped out of mainline theology. And what I have found fascinating, even going back before Lindy's work, is the way cosmologists have brought those old issues back onto the table.
Well, certainly because of the notion of an expanding universe in the early part of the 20th century, when the steady state, even Einstein in his general relativity assumed the steady state. That's why he got the cosmological constant a little wrong. So we have a steady state there, and then Friedman and others showed that the equations are better satisfied with an expanding universe, and then you have Hubble proving that the universe is expanding, and suddenly it's back on the table. So guys and girls like you get excited that maybe this is a demonstration. You roll the movie back and you have to start with a beginning.
Well, I've moved along a bit since
No, I know that.
I was talking with Andre. There was a principle that the late ancient or early medieval theologian Augustine applied liberally throughout his theology, which was the principle of plenitude. And that was the idea that if God is a creator, surely God would create as much as God could create. And I have come to recognize that if the scientists do decide that there are multiple universes, then that's just a major extension of Augustine's principle of plenitude.
Well, a corollary of that, though, is that if that's true, we know this universe can sustain life. We're
Yes.
sitting here to demonstrate one data point, but we have it,
Yes.
and it's real.
Yes.
And even if we're making it up, it's still real of making
Yes.
it up. So there's no doubt that something's happening here. But if you take the multiple universe hypothesis, part of that, in order to create a universe that is fine-tuned, you have to innumerable and perhaps infinite number of universes, but the incredibly vast number of them must be sterile if you're just mixing up
Yes,
by random
absolutely.
all of these constants
Absolutely.
of physics.
But-
An incredibly large number.
But there's
and so
no-
how does that
Well-
seems to undermine your theory of God doing all this for plenitude.
There's no, we humans are in no position to say that God doesn't value non-humans and that God wouldn't value having as many universes as possible.
Even empty ones that are sterile?
Yeah.
Now,
Plenitude. We have got mosquitoes and we've got humans. Why do we have everything from mosquitoes to humans? Plenitude. But what is interesting about the multiverse hypothesis is it raises, once again, an argument that Thomas Aquinas had with a contemporary, St. Bonaventure, about whether it's conceivable that our universe could be of infinite duration. And Thomas argued that it's conceivable, but Scripture teaches, and there are some places that philosophy or science can't tread. Scripture teaches that our universe did have a beginning. But it raises the question whether it makes sense to talk about an infinite number of universes or an infinite series of universes. And so the same sorts of questions about the intelligibility of taking a concept like infinity that applies in mathematics and using it to talk about physical reality has just been brought right back into theologians' faces again.
Yeah, and this is a very powerful statement because in deep cosmology now, when you are in one universe, it can look infinite from your perspective within the universe, but from an external perspective, it's not
Right.
infinite. And then there are potential infinite numbers of those universes. Now,
Yes.
there is a difference in the sense that under some models, you have to start with a something, and the number is incalculably large, heading towards infinity, but it's not infinity in the past. It's only infinity in the future. And under other models, you have a cyclical thing that you can't tell in the past. So, do you have a dog in this fight in terms of theology? If you have multiple universes, where you would have one series that had to have some kind of beginning to go infinite, and another where you could have been infinite in the past?
I've got a chihuahua in this fight. I don't understand the concept of infinity even as used in mathematics, or especially as used in mathematics. And so I tend to agree with Bonaventure's idea that if there's an infinite series that from past infinitely, that things should have progressed through an infinite series of whatevers, whether it's events in our universe or universes in this foam of universes. And I tend to side with Bonaventure that in the concept of infinity simply cannot be applied to physical reality.
Yeah, and the difference between a conceptual infinity and a countable infinity, people talk about those kinds of differences. So, and is that more of a personal feeling? And I'd feel the same way, just because we're so limited in our minds about the nature of infinity. Or is it something that you think resonates with your concept of God and theology?
I would just say it's a personal intuition of mine. For instance, when they talk about the Big Bang, before the notion that as you get toward what used to be thought of as the beginning, where the universe had to be infinitely small and infinitely dense, I don't think that makes sense. And so I don't think infinity applies to physical reality at all. But it really is a philosophical intuition, and I don't know enough math, and I don't know enough cosmology to argue it.
So at the end of the day, I love science and theology, and cosmology is what I like to wallow in order to deal with this. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure we actually make progress in understanding A, is there a God, or B, what that God may be like. But I feel intuitively that that's where we should be putting our souls.
Well, the way I put it is people like Paul Davies, I love him as an author. What he's done is he's taken a number of these cosmological developments from science and said, look, theologians, all of these issues are back on the table and you've got to deal with them. And I think that's a great step in the right direction.
So are you dealing with it?
Not I. I have to leave that to the scientists.